Neopets has had a long lineage of dramatic plots told throughout its historic life. From wars fought between dashing pirates and Moroccan royalty to a good old-fashioned murder mystery, there have been tons of stories played out on the site. Each conflict that settled in Neopia and beyond put the power in the hands of the players, allowing you to explore alongside the heroes and villains. Perhaps you had to choose between Hannah and the Thieves Guild, or fight for Meridel against the evil Lord Cass. Watching plots unfold in real time was, and still is, a large part of many people's fond Neopian memories. Sitting at the big desktop computer and scrolling through the latest comic chapter after school filled up a lot of childhoods. That's the dream, isn't it? Experiencing things as if you were a kid again. Luckily for you, if you're deeply overwhelmed and missing a lack of responsibilities, I have just the thing. After a stretch of peace in Neopia, I am happy to report that the plot is plotting again, which means that you have a reason to get out of bed again, or stay in bed. I don't care, I'm not your father. In any case, Neopia has started turning hues of gray, and that's likely not great. And there's also a teeny tiny rift in the universe, apparently. But today, we are going to recap the lore of The Void Within, the latest plot on Neopets. Grab your 2006 Psy Bunny plushie who looks like she's seen the heat death of the universe, and settle in. It's time to get gray. Before we hop in, I'd like to thank Neopets for sponsoring this video. That's right, folks, they are not afraid of my behavior on this channel somehow. The Void Within is a real celebration of the heart and creativity of past plots with a modern twist. New characters, such as Nyx and Junie, breathe so much life into the storyline, and I'm incredibly excited to see how it plays out. There has truly never been a better time to join Neopets in the present day, so if you haven't, check out the link below. Be sure to follow Neopets on Instagram, TikTok, X, and Facebook for all those delicious plot updates, and check out their YouTube channel. Thank you again to Neopets for sponsoring this video, not words I thought I would ever say. Without further ado, let's get into it. If you've never been involved with a Neopets plot before, I'll give you a quick crash course. Plots on Neopets are long-form stories told on the site, primarily communicated through comics and dialogue scenes. These plots usually see the story broken down into small sections, each one being released periodically. They tend to feature user involvement in some form, either through battling, collecting, or minigames. These plots are a massive deal and can last weeks or months. Although the plot technically launched on June 17th of this year, that is not where we're starting. The lore itself has lore. George R.R. Martin is shaking right now, he's crying. Our first real confirmation of the plot was dropped on July 17th, 2023, when Neopets released its New Era trailer. Among all of the other great news, the end of the video showcased a silhouette of a new character, as well as the plot's title, The Void Within. Fast forward a bit later into 2023, landing in October, we can check into the Faerie Festival. The Faerie Festival was a new look for an event previously called Charity Corner, where players could donate items in exchange for points. These points could be used to get all sorts of prizes, and the Faerie Festival followed that format to a T. The event followed Jadora and Elucin, two fairies who are certainly not entering an enemies to lovers thing right now. Certainly. Fiora, the fairy queen, asked Jadora and Elucin to host a fairy festival that would help dissipate a thick smog that had begun forming around Neopia. The festival would feature item recycling in an effort to help out the polluted environment. If you know anything about these two, you'd know that didn't go over well. Elucin and Jadora then hosted two dueling festivals, each one having distinct prizes. Users could choose which festival they wanted to go to, and in turn, which fairy they wanted to help out. As the festival went on, cutscenes began to flow in, and Elucin grew sick. We ended up learning that Malchus Vile, a nasty, evil man involved in Neopia's past, had invested in businesses contributing to the pollution. Soon after a spat between Malchus and Ghidorah took place, we saw Eleusin cornered by Balthazar, a bounty hunter seemingly sent by our villain to harm the fairy. Thankfully, Ghidorah was able to save her friend, from being bottled up, leading to Malchus Vile's arrest. The Faerie Festival was a success, and at least one more dishonorable little shit was behind bars. That was pretty much the end of that, or at least it seemed like it was the end. On October 19th, after the festival had wrapped up, we got a comic, our first Void Within comic. The strip featured Vera, another well-known Neopian villain. She seemed to be joined by a fairy, a dark fairy by the looks of it. The two discuss the events of the Faerie Festival, and Vera mentions that the oath couldn't weaken the fairies. So we can glean that Malchus wasn't alone. In fact, the fairy says that he was only a harbinger for her return. Return. Interesting. She's given Fiora a taste of the future, and we know there will be more to come. The final panel showcases a paintbrush, one never before seen. After all that spooky ooky shit, we have a mere few months to cool down and get ready. Every year, Neopets does an advent calendar from December 1st to 31st, where you can grab free goodies each day. These items are usually accompanied by a comic or art piece of some kind. This round, however, saw an extra piece added, some conversations sprinkled in. These dialogue pieces featured two characters, Reyna, an Aisha who runs the advent calendar, and Orion, a greasy-looking Oscar Wilde type guy. Orion barged in, looking fresh off 6 5-hour energies and a pack of menthols, asking Reyna to shut down the advent calendar. He recounted tripping over a lyre in the snow and being plagued with awful visions ever since. Reyna told him kindly to go to bed, and the advent calendar continued on. All was quiet for the advent calendar until about a week later, when he returned to beg Reyna once more. He warned that Neopia needed to start preparing for something. This was obviously incredibly weird, and Reyna refused to yield. Despite the vehement rejection, Orion rushed off to find proof, which oddly enough worked. Orion showed us his visions. We were treated to a beautiful comic which showcased a full version of our silhouette from the New Era video. In this comic, we saw an Aisha floating through the universe, surrounded by a bunch of junk and a Faerie in a backpack. She seems to be exploring a purple mass in space, surrounded by white eyes. Her helmet seems to be scratched, and she wears a scared look. Something must be lurking, but we can't be sure what. Going a little further, we see another comic on the 27th. This one shows our Aisha and Faerie being attacked by a tentacled monster, which leaves them pretty damn beaten up. The two hide in the shelter of a cave where our little Faerie friend seems to be in rough shape. That monster, whatever it was, knew how to throw down. Quickly after, our third comic hits. This strip focuses on the aftermath of the attack, with the Aisha and Faerie huddled together. Some sort of color change seems to be spreading through the Aisha's arm, and the Faerie is straight up Bob the Buildering it on a piece of strange technology. After they're done working, our Aisha puts on the wrist thingy, and it works. The last comic of 2023 was released on December 29th, where we see the Faerie slumped over in the arms of their friend. The Aisha's speech bubbles read, "What did you do? I know you saved me somehow, but how could you leave me all alone?" After all that emotional turmoil, we meet back up with Reyna and Orion on the 30th. This time, they're joined by Queen Fiora, who seems to have sensed the bad vibes. She tells the two that the lyre has been emitting a ton of unknown magic, which she's been investigating. Everyone is clearly disturbed by the development, but that's all we have for the Advent calendar. Over the next few months, things were pretty dry. We did get confirmation that the Faerie was alive, thank God, but that was about it. Then March rolled around, and things started really kicking up. On the 19th, the Uni's clothing shopkeeper turned gray. Remember the Brightvale image from earlier? Yeah, shit hit the fan. Her cheery greeting dulled as well, changing into a sad line about her lack of taste. How weird, how odd, how peculiar. The grooming parlor Usul was soon grayed out, followed by the bread baker. It was beginning to look like Neopia had fallen into a bit of a Lexapro shortage, but in March's monthly Neo AMA, fittingly hosted by my wonderful friend Amanda, we got a cool piece of info. TNT Aesop was able to drop that the Aisha we'd been seeing was named Nyx. Yep, Nyx from the intro. Neat. The AMA was followed by the Hubert's Hot Dogs shopkeeper turning gray at the end of March. Oh, and I guess we should talk about April Fools. Enter Smile With Me, the most Tumblr sexy man-ass Sephora I have ever seen. The site was riddled with pop-up motivational posters with quotes such as "hang in there" and "think happy thoughts." Our aforementioned little freak, Smile With Me, noticed the horrible little gray curse going around and offered to help out by littering those posters around. He'd get a bit irked if you closed him, though. Eventually, he presented you with a contract. Pitch your undying loyalty to him, and all will be fine. You do have to sign the contract, though. Like, you have to. You can't click away. After this, the posters themselves became unmotivational. Cease Thinking has lived within me since I first saw it, but that's April Fool's. On April 8th, someone else turned gray, but it wasn't quite a shopkeeper. Instead, it was the neg fairy Kari, who runs the neggery. If you've been a long-time player, you were probably instantly concerned. Kari hosts the Festival of Nags, which coincidentally was to be held soon, and that it was, but before that, we started seeing a bunch of Neopian land posters around social media. Each one advertised a different section of Neopia, but they had all seemingly been defaced, doodled on, turned gray, and covered in evil faces. Anyway, Festival of Nags. Kari wasn't feeling all that great, but the celebration continued in her stead. The Festival of Nags let users hunt around for, well, nags, which contained neat prizes. In this event, we saw the grayness referred to as the Grey Curse, which seems to be the working name. Kari grew weary, lacking the energy to hide nags, at which point Orion stepped in. Personally, I would have picked anyone else, but you know. Eventually, his visions worsened again, and he asked for help. Players could find bits and pieces of a creature scattered around Neopia. Legs, a tail, all that. These would then be reported to Orion as they were spotted. He mentions each time you had a sighting, his visions would get clearer. This whole ordeal brought us 2 new clues. The little creature was a new pet called the Tufa, which eased Orion when he touched it, and large events caused the visions to flare. He mentioned the Altador Cup as a possible next step, which is coming up very soon. In the following months, we saw many other Neopian icons turn gray. King Colt Sand Shrine, TDMBGPOP, the Snow Shopkeeper, Trudy's Surprise, the Banker, the Giant Omelet, somehow. Even Miles from the Wheel of Knowledge and the Money Tree got the curse. However, we are finally getting to the moment you've all been waiting for. June 17th, The Void Within officially begins. We're treated to a lovely plot hub which showcases everything going on. This video is primarily lore focused, so we'll zero in on everything in the story section. At the moment of recording, 2 chapters have been released. Chapter 1 is all finished and Chapter 2 seems to be a bit over the halfway mark. Each segment of the chapter is released on its own, so it seems to be a slow burn situation. Chapter 1 begins with a comic featuring the scary gray paintbrush we've had our eyes on. The characters shown in this comic are Jaren, Leisha, and Tormund. Yep, those are 2 separate gray loops, I know. These guys are all pre-established characters. Tormund was featured in the Darkest Faerie PS2 game, and Jaren and Leisha were involved in the Meridel plots. They have clearly turned gray. Tormund in the bottom corner is writing a letter signed with a heart. Oh, and Meridell's gray now. Cool. In the second section, we see the aforementioned King Skarl waking up washed out and attempting to scrub the color off of himself in the rainbow fountain. This seems to have no effect, and Skarl remains gray even at the moment. The rainbow fountain usually changes the color of Neopets, so it's certainly odd that it won't change this particular one. In Section 3, we see a letter which urges all Neopian leaders to meet in Altador. It's presented as a very urgent matter, bringing the scope of the Grey Curse into a much bigger realm. Comic number 4 shows us each of these leaders heading on over, while comic 5 shows us the meetings beginning to take shape. When Section 6 comes up, we are shown a conversation between Fiora and the various gathered delegates. They discuss the grayness coinciding with a rift forming in the sky, as well as these things called void essences appearing around Neopia. Dr. Landelbrot asks the player to help collect them for study. The essence seems to rapidly disappear, which makes it a bit hard to look into. In the 7th section, we can see a beautiful comic of Baelia, the Grey Fairy, looking up into the night sky. She is surrounded by novas off to the coast of Fairyland. Moving into Section 8, we have a conversation between a few sorta new faces. Naya, the Rainbow Fountain Fairy, Baelia, and Tavi. Tavi originally discovered Baelia, who was trapped in a cage atop a mountain. Naya explains the Grey Curse to Baelia and Tavi and asks Baelia for help. Fiora requested Baelia's presence as she's been gray for quite a long time and could provide a point of reference. Baelia and Tavi decide to head out after a bit of contemplation and try their best to provide some support. We're then shown a comic of Baelia and Tavi embarking on their journey in Section 9. We're seeing Nyx again, yay! In Section 10, a comic features Nyx seemingly projecting that rift into Neopia. Whatever that thing is on her arm, it seems to be able to open portals. And with that, we conclude Chapter 1. If you hover over each section of every comic, you'll earn items and a plot point. Void Essence Collection also helps nab you many more plot points, so be sure to do that. You can get some sick stuff. Chapter 2 begins with Tavi and Baelia arriving in Brightvale, where they are instantly swarmed by purple and black, wraith-like creatures. The figure holding the paintbrush is seen once again, and we even get a glimpse of his face, and Vera's. Unfortunately, the two villains run away before we can get any further info. When Chapter 2 dropped, the Battle Dome and volunteering sections of the plot came with it. If your pets are trained, you can have them battle against the void creatures seen in the comics. These guys are called voidlings and void prowlers inside the dome. When you go to beat them up, their reactions are a bit odd. They seem to be more relieved than anything when you defeat them and lead with statements about betrayal. Maybe they don't want to be here in the first place. If your pets can't fight, they can also volunteer at the hospital for some points and items. In Section 2, Baelia and Tavi are confronted by Vera and attacked by void creatures. Vera runs off to the mysterious paintbrush guy to tell him to report back, and the voidlings continue to ambush Tavi. The comic ends with a crash, darkened by Baelia's silhouette. Section 3 shows the aftermath of the spat, with our heroes huddled together. Oh, and Nyx is descending from the sky, so she's in Neopia now. Barreling right on into Section 4, we can see Nyx's first contact with Neopian folk. She has no idea where she is or what's occurring with her hand, which has turned galaxy. Tavi tells her that she's in Brightvale, which doesn't seem to ring a bell. Nyx asks for help as Junie is hurt, but Baelia says that the injuries look unusual and the healing fairy might not be able to help. Junie, who has survived like hell at this point, seems to be covered in void essence according to Tavi. Nyx decides to head toward the Council of Leaders and then Neopia Central to find her brother. New can of worms just dropped and spilled everywhere. In section 5, we see an adorable comic of Baelia, Tavi, and Nyx adventuring through a field of babas. Following that, we have another quick conversation, this time with our Faerie, Junie, involved. Tavi gives him some tea, which he quickly sips up. Nyx is shocked to see that he warmed up to somebody new so fast and remarks that he must be pretty sick. These conversations are semi-pared down for time, so I highly recommend going back and reading all of them for yourself to get all of the cute little dialogue moments. In section 7, we find the group on the Brightvale outskirts. Tavi says there's something she wanted to ask Nyx, which seems to give the other a frown. Nyx asks if it's about how Junie got injured, and Tavi replies that she's curious, but wanted to know about her powers. In section 8, our final section at the moment, Nyx says that she has no idea how she protected the two, and didn't even know she had magical powers. Baelia questions further, and she replied that she got scared and wanted to help, and that she did. It was apparently a similar situation when Junie and Nyx arrived in Brightvale. She wasn't aware of her abilities. But for now, that is all I have for you on The Void Within. Even though I'm a relatively new player, I am incredibly stoked for what's to come, and I hope you are too. This plot looks amazing, and I fucking love sci-fi drama, so I'm so pumped. If you have any theories for the future of this plot, please let me know. I'd love to hear them. Huge, massive thank you to Amanda, the Amanda Files, for helping me out with this video. I bugged her the entire time and she was such a big help. And thank you again to Neopets. Make sure and check out all of their links below if you haven't already, and join me on there. It's fun, I'll be your Neo friend. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay wonderful, and goodbye.